screen. All right, 16 of us are here. There are three or four more that I'm expecting, but we are here. Let's begin. So the idea was when I was thinking, what should I teach? It's always an issue, right? Do I go heavy? Do I go light? In July, I went very heavy with Jewish theology, right? And then in August, we went pretty light with Mel Brooks. So that was kind of a bit of a jump. And then we had the high holidays. We're finally settling into a normal kind of schedule. So I'm thinking, what do I teach? What do I teach? What do I teach? This is very hard because it's hard to know what's going to appeal to a lot of people. And so I was somehow, it came into my head. I've always had this uh, connection to Elijah in a way, as many of us do, because Eliyahu, HaNavi, shows up everywhere. He's at the bris, he's at Pesach, he's at the Havdalah, and he is a figure that has remained from the time when we're going to read today from the text in the book of Kings, the Sefer Melachim, from that time, which is about 950 BCE. Okay, it's a while back, all right, 950 BCE till today, and there's a line of his transmutations over the years and the role that he plays all through Jewish history. And it's quite a fascinating transformation, but it all ties into, first of all, reading the original text. Many people have never read anything from the Book of Kings. And there's a pretty good reason why, because it is, if you everybody have the link to the genealogy now? You got that? You clicked it up? Just take a look at that for a moment, and you'll see that once the kingdom splits, right? You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Once the kingdom splits, so you have King Saul's the first king, right? And then you have David, and there it goes to Solomon, and there are two other sons who do not. One of them, Absalom, actually tries to rebel against his father David, and that's a very sad story. The story of David is a very tough story as well, and you should basically it has everything you need for a major Game of Thrones, and this is what we have. Those of you who enjoyed the Game of Thrones and are interested in royal competition, interested in palace intrigue, interested in incest, rape, violence, corruption. Well, you got it all there. It's all there for you. It's and it's not a pretty picture. So if you look down there at the time of Solomon, he is succeeded by Rehoboam. His wife's name is not mentioned, so she just says wife. And then the fellow who breaks away from Rehoboam is Jeroboam. And Jeroboam breaks away and says that he doesn't want the central shrine, the central place of worship, to be Yerushalayim and the Temple of Solomon. And he establishes another offering place in Shechem, or Nablus, which is the northern part of what we call today the West Bank. Palestine, and thus he creates a rivalry. All of a sudden, there are now two foci, if you will, of power, and that, of course, creates a tremendous split. And the characteristics of the Israel now, we have Israel. Jeroboam is now the first king of Israel, and Rehoboam is the first king of Judea, right? So we have this split between Yehuda v'Yisrael. Yehuda v'Yisrael. The Israelite kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, goes from Jeroboam and finally is taken over in 722 BCE. So it's there for a couple of hundred years, and it's taken over by a invasion from the north by the Assyrians, and they are dispersed, and many flee back to Judah. Others are dispersed throughout the world. And then you get this idea of the 10 lost tribes coming from the kingdom of Israel, all over dispersed and no longer a viable kingdom, whereas the kingdom of Judah remains there until, of course, the end of the Second Temple period. when the second temple is destroyed. But along the way, there's a lot of intrigue, etc., which we won't talk about today. But just to give you an idea that there is this idea of a split kingdom, and Jeroboam's idea of worshiping elsewhere seems to begat a series of, if you will, uh, concessions to idolatry, at least for idolatry from the point of view of the kingdom of Yehuda. And we're going to see a lot of that when we talk about the Elijah story. But Elijah is the prophet that is there in the period of Ahab and Jezebel. If you look, uh, and the kingdom of Judah is then Jehoshaphat. So it's Ahab. That's the period that Elijah will appear. And he appears without any kind of introduction. And we're going to go right to that. We're going to back up a little bit. We're going now to Sepharia. All of you will be able to have a screen share. And you'll all be able to, you can get rid of that email if you wish, unless you want to keep it. I mean, get rid of that chart unless you want to keep it. So
Rabbi,
yes.
Who's Jeroboam's parents?
We don't know, but he's they think a cousin of Rehoboam. He's part of that same family, right? He's part of that royal family, but he has issues with this idea that there should be a central shrine, and he wants to. So some people see him as a because the people who wrote the Bible, the people who won, not people who lost, right? So he's always presented as a despicable character, because one of the first things he does is he sets up also pagan temples as well around. Now, this is because, now you might say he's doing that because he wants to attract a larger audience. Because remember, at this time, you should always remember, no Palestine or Israel or Judea or however you want to call it, didn't have hermetically sealed countries. There are people of all kinds who lived there, Canaanites and Philistines, and on and on and on. It was a country that was very multicultural. So perhaps Rehoboam's ideology was, in order to unify this kingdom of Israel, I want to have all the people feel that I am connected to them. So he takes on the local gods. The most well-known is Baal, B-A apostrophe A-L, Baal, which is the classic Canaanite god that we know from very early on in the Tanakh. So we're going to share screen and go to a site called Sepharia, Sefaria, as you see. Mm-hmm. And it is a fantastic site. It's a site for sore eyes, to be honest, because it really helps us a great deal, because it has brought together a multitude of Jewish texts with translation. So there's no excuse anymore to say, I don't read Hebrew, I can't get to this stuff. It's all in this wonderful site, the entire Bible, rabbinic literature, midrash. It's really a fantastic site, Sepharia, and it deserves your support. So if you do have the means to support them financially, please do it. So we're going to start with chapter 16, verse 29. So I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and maybe, or have one of you read as well. So I'll start, and then we'll alternate, and you read it in Hebrew or in English as is convenient for you. So I'll start. You have it, 629. Ve'achav ben Omri malach al Yisrael b'shnat 38 shana le'asa melech Yehuda. Vayimloch Achav ben Omri al Yisrael v'Shomron 22 shana. Ahab, son of Omri, became king over Israel in the 38th year of the king of Asa of Judah, and Ahab, son of Omri, reigned over Israel and Samaria for 22 years. So let's have someone read now verse 30. Just unmute and read. Yes, Hebrew or English, it's okay.
I'll read in English.
Fine, please.
Ahab, son of Omri, did what was displeasing to Hashem, the Lord, more than all who preceded him.
Okay, so he doesn't have a good reputation, okay? So, I mean, and the fellows who came before him are terrible too, but he was the worst, okay? Which is pretty good to be considered the worst. I mean, you got to work at that. He worked hard at it. Let's move on. Verse 31. Who'd like to read?
Not content to follow the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he took his wife, Jezebel, daughter of King Ekbal of the Phoenicians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him.
Okay, so we have this consort, the royal consort, a name that has become an infamous name, right? Jezebel. And she is a follower of Baal. She's not of a Hebrew or an Israelite. She is a Phoenician, and she is a very fervent server of Baal. And guess what? Her husband goes along with it. And then what does he do? Vayakam mizbeach lebal bet habal asher bana b'shomron. Who'd like to read the English? 32.
He erected an altar to Baal in the temple of Baal, which he built in Samaria.
Right. That's where Nablus is, or Shechem is in Samaria.
Reb Moshe, I had a question.
Yes, please.
Question. So, what were the sins of Jeroboam that were? I mean, are they compared to the sins of Ahab? Or are they worse? Or I mean,
well, they were the basic sin of all. The entire Tanakh is based upon one ideology.
Yeah.
One idea. It's
Idolatry.
anti-idolatry.
Yeah.
That's it. Anti-idolatry. And it means that people are always moving off the path and they're looking for other gods. That seems to be what irks everybody. And the prophets are also irked by the people who are in the temple by not doing it with the right intent. You get a lot of that as well, that it's being done by rote. It's like what Luther said about the Catholics, right? You're selling dispensations. You become corrupted. So they have two basic targets. In this case, it is not in Judea, the target. The target is more in the kingdom of Israel. But that's the basic issue, is that it is a loss of faith in this central, if you will, pillar of the Tanakh, which is the one God, the one true God, of course, they claim, and a true God which cannot be in any way embodied, and that's a drawback. Ken, if you're selling God, that's a drawback. That's one of the reasons Christianity did very well. It could embody God, right? And that embodiment helped people with identification to a certain degree. Let's move on. And Ahab did.
Ahab also made a sacred post.
Right.
Ahab did more to vex the Lord, the God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who preceded him.
Okay, so he also sets up an Asherah. Now, both of these things, the Baal and the Asherah or the post, or this meaning a totem. It's a totem post, really, a kind of totem post. These are explicitly the things that were always told to destroy. If you remember, in our horrible wars of genocide that are talked about in the 5 books of Moses, that's one of the things you destroy are these totem posts, asherot, because it's also connected with some sort of tree worship as well. Verse 34, Vayamav banachiel bet ha'eli et Jericho, be'aviram bechoro yizda v'sagiv uv'siguv Si'iro hitziv delateha kedvar Adonai asher diber biyad Yehoshua ben Nun. So what did he do during his reign? Let's have someone read.
During his reign, Hiel the Bethelite fortified Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and set its gates in place at the cost of Segub, his youngest, in accordance with the words that the Lord had spoken through Joshua, son of Nun.
So what is the issue with Jericho? What was the story there? Do you remember? Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Jericho, right? So what was the end of that story?
The walls came tumbling down.
The walls came tumbling down. So you were not supposed to rebuild those walls. They were going to be a sign. And he took upon himself, this fellow Kiel, to do it. And he did it at the cost of his firstborn and his youngest son. Whatever that means, we don't know. Obviously, they were either killed or murdered, or they were killed by accident in the building of the city. It's unclear. Or was a curse put upon them? We don't know. But there was a prohibition against rebuilding Jericho, the walls of Jericho.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly sacrificed. It's left fairly open. Now we get to our introduction to our main character, chapter 17 of the first book of Kings. Vayomer Eliyahu atishpi mitoshavei Gilad el Achav chai Adonai Elohei Yisrael asher amadati levanav im yeh hashanim ha'ele tal umatar ki im lefi devari. Would like to read that in English.
Elijah
I'll
the
read it.
Tishbite.
Okay, just go start reading. Don't tell me you will read. Just read. Okay.
Elijah the Tishbite, an inhabitant of Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord lives, the God of Israel, whom I serve, there will be no dew or rain except at my bidding."
Okay, so this is our first introduction to Elijah. We have no idea beyond the fact that he is a Tishbite and he lives in Gilad, and that's all we know about him. We get no introduction at all. He shows up as a prophet challenging Ahab. Okay, Ahab, of course, is a name that got very famous from Moby Dick, right? But King Ahab. So this is what he says. He says, "I will prevent rain from coming down." Now, this is kind of interesting because you have many stories later on of people who, during a drought, are there to bring rain. Okay, but he's saying, showing you that I am indeed Vayi Devar. Look at the next verse, that the word of God has come to me. I am doing this to show you the power of God, and I am God's prophet. I bring God's word. I will also bring God's power, and I will stop the rain and the dew. That's a big threat, by the way, in the Middle East, saying you're going to do that. So the word of the Lord came to him. Let's read verse 3. Leave this place.
Leave this place, turn eastward, and go into hiding by the Wadi Sherith, which is east of the Jordan.
Okay. So God comes to him and he says, okay, after you said that, you better get out of town. It's a pretty tough thing you said. And go to a wadi which is east of the Jordan, which means it's on the other side of the Jordan, right? Trans-Jordan. And it's a wadi. You ever know what a wadi is? A wadi is a sort of a little valley created by rainfall that maybe once or twice a year. Heavy rain goes through these wadis, and then when they're not there, they're dry riverbeds. And there are many wadis, if you will, in the deserts of Judea and elsewhere. So, why is he going to this wadi? Because me'anachal tishteh ve'eta orvim tziviti lechalkelcha sham. And I will save you from this drought that you are bringing, because what's going to happen in verse 4?
You will drink from the wadi.
You will drink? Yes, go ahead, go on.
You will drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there.
Yes, this is one of the first kinds of miraculous things that Elijah will be involved in. He's going to be fed by the ravens. Ravens will bring him food. Imagine. Now, the reason I like the idea of ravens, because those of you who were Game of Thrones folks know that the ravens play a very big role. Whether this influenced them to have ravens, I don't know. But the ravens will feed him, and he'll have water from the wadi. So he will be protected from this curse. Vayelech v'yasa kedvar Adonai, vayelech v'yashem benachal kerit asher al pnei Yarden. And this basically said, go ahead, verse 5.
He proceeded to do as the Lord had bidden. He went and he stayed by the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan.
העורבים מביאים לו לחם ובשר בבוקר ולחם ובשר בערב ומן הנחל ישתה. This is pretty amazing. What do the ravens do?
Ravens brought him bread and meat every morning and every evening, and he drank from the wadi.
Right. So he was
Pretty powerful.
right, it was quite a miraculous thing that they would bring him both bread and meat, sandwiches, I guess, deli. Basically, he was able to get. This was before Grubhub, okay? This is right, delivery directly from the ravens. But after a while, the wadi, what happens?
Dried up because there was no rain in the land.
Right. So after a while, the wadi that had rain going through it dried up. And then again, we have this Vayihi Devar Adonai Elav Lemor, and the word of the Lord came to him. Okay, now let's understand what this means when the word of the Lord comes to him. It's not that he hears, "Hi, Elijah." That's not it. The question always becomes when it comes to prophecy. When it comes to prophecy, or any time in the Torah that it talks about and God said, or etc., what is it saying? It's not saying. It's saying that the person has this voice that comes through him or her. This voice that comes through him or her. It's only articulated by the person. The God does not articulate that voice. So what is the characteristic of a prophet? There's quite a bit of work that's been done about that. And that is one of the things that Rabbi Heschel does in his book. What is it about the personality of the prophet that allows this voice to be heard and to brought it? Now, in today's sense, if I came to you and said, I'm hearing God, you'd say, well, there is medication to take for that, right? And they say maybe this is incipient signs of schizophrenia. Now, it is very interesting because the prophets do hear voices, but again, the voice that ultimately we hear is their voice, being the ones who bring the word. Navi, right? The word Navi is we bring. The person who brings something to you, lahavi mashu in Hebrew, to bring something. That's what a prophet is. Somebody who brings you something. Kum, God said to him what? On verse 9. Who'd like to read that?
Go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have designated a widow there to feed you.
Okay, so this is God is certainly taking care of Elijah. By the way, look at the name Sarfat. Sarfat of Sidon. Sarfat will later become the word for France.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why, but it's there are a number of places. Ashkenaz and Sarfat are both mentioned, and later they got transferred into our understanding about the names of European countries. Ashkenaz being Germany and Sarfat being France. So he says, I have there a place for you to go where you will be taken care of. So what does he do? Verse 10. Good. I hear a whisper.
Yes, so
Bring
he
it up.
went at once to Zarephath. When he came to the entrance of the town, a widow was there gathering wood. He called out to her, please bring me a little water in your pitcher and let me drink.
Right. Similar, what's happening in our Parsha this week? Anybody can recall?
Rebecca at the well. Isn't that Rebecca at the well?
That's right. And it's, so this is now remember, where is the well? If you know anything about, there are a few places left in the north of Israel, in a few other villages, which have remained pretty much in the shape of traditional towns. In the middle of the town, there is a well, right in the middle, like the main square. Around the well is the marketplace. You have a square, and around it all the stalls and stands, etc. So the well becomes the where we get the word, the idea of being around the water cooler. Remember that sense? Today, everybody's got their own bottles of water. But there was a time when the idea was you gathered around the water cooler to exchange what? Chit chat. right? That's how you heard about what's going on, etc. Here in the office, what's happening on the 7th floor, what's happening on the 6th floor. So this well is the gathering place of the city. He says, can you give me some water? And then what does she do? Verse 11.
As she went to fetch,
Go ahead. If you started, keep going.
I didn't know whether I was muted or not. As she went to fetch it, he called out to her, please bring along a piece of bread for me.
Okay, so he said, not only am I thirsty, but I could use some bread, right? The ravens are no longer there. Okay, the ravens have gone their way. And then what happened? As the Lord your God lives, right? She says, and it's very interesting, she notices in him that he is a prophet, or somebody who's bringing God's word. What prophets wore, we don't know. Were they wearing a special kind of cloak? Did they have a special kind of belt or something? We do know that there were, and this is all the way through the prophets, that there are schools of prophets. There are schools of prophets. The way a master artist in the medieval period, right, Rembrandt, he had a workshop. He didn't do every painting himself, right? Surgeons don't do the beginning and the end of an operation, right? They have a workshop of people who do that stuff. And maybe he was wearing something that associated him with a school of prophets. We just don't know. But she has recognized him as as the Lord your God lives. And what does she say? Continue on, whoever started that.
I have nothing big, nothing but a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I'm just gathering a couple of sticks so that I can go home and prepare it for me and my son. We shall eat it and then we shall die.
Wow. Okay, so you got a rather dramatic statement here, right? I want you to keep this scene in mind, because it will be important as the development of Elijah happens throughout the last couple of millennia, more than a couple of millennia, almost 3,000 years. So why does she say she's going to die?
She saw the prophet. She saw God in the prophet.
No, because that's all they had was that little jug of oil and flour. And after that, that's all they had left. She said, I'll make it for the dinner, and then after that, I don't know what's going to happen. So she's bereft, okay? She only sees the darkness of what is going to happen. So Vayomer Eleha Eliyahu al tiri boi asi kedvarecha ach asi li misham ugak tana barishona v'hotzeit li v'lach ulevnech ta'asi ba'akrona. So what does he suggest? Please, verse 13.
Don't be afraid, said Elijah to her. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a small cake from what you have there and bring it out to me. Then make some for yourself and your son.
Okay, so we know something's up, right? Something is up. Yes, Betsy.
I guess this is pretty indirect. I mean, it's sort of like, why doesn't God just make it rain and send some manna or something? I mean,
well, because God does not operate that way anymore. He did for a while, and it didn't work then. They were complaining anyway. You know that. Too much manna. Give us something else. We're cantankerous people. But just remember that once you leave the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, God recedes. God recedes. The only way God comes in again into the scene is through the prophet. There's no more direct, except you'll see a scene or two, something that's a little bit similar. So what did she do? So what happened?
She went and did as Elijah had spoken, and she and he and her household had food for a long time.
All right, so that was the miracle, one of the miracles, that by doing what does she merit this great bounty? What did she do?
Well, she gave him the oil and the water and made a cake.
For him, right. She hardly had enough for herself and her son, And yet, when he said, "Can you make one for me first?" she says, "Okay." So she gets a merit for that. And this is an important little kind of tale that we will see later on repeated time and time again about how Eliyahu became part of Jewish folklore. Jewish folklore. Okay, so that's a little story. So Elijah has certain connections. Okay, that's what's becoming said here. So what after that? What happened? ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה, חלה בן האישה בעלת הבית, ויהי חוליו חזק מאוד, עד אשר לא נותרו בו נשמה. So after a while, what happened?
The son of the mistress of the house fell sick, and his illness grew worse until he had no breath left in him.
Okay, so it's not a totally happy story yet. Let's go to verse 18. Vatomer Eliyahu, Mali velach isha Elohim, bata elai laskir et avoni v'lamit et b'nai. So now she's a little bit taken aback. You know, you said I would have this bounty, and now what did she say to Elijah? Verse 18. Would like to read that?
What harm have I done you, O man of God, that you should come here and recall my sin and cause the death of my son?
So we don't know what that sin is, but clearly she's saying you came here and I'm getting punished for something that I did, and it's because of you. So what does Elijah say? Vayomer eleha tenili et benech vayikachehu mecheka v'yalehu el ha'aliyah asher hu yoshev sham v'yashkivehu al mitato. So what does he say?
Give me
Verse
the boy.
19. Yeah, please.
Give me the boy, he said to her, and taking him from her arms, he carried him to the upper chamber where he was staying and laid him down on his own bed.
ויקרא אל אדוני, ויאמר אדוני אלוהי, הגם על האלמנה אשר אני מתגורר עמה, הרעות להמית את בנה? So he's a little upset. And what does he say?
He cried out to the Lord and said, "O Lord, my God, will you bring calamity upon this widow whose guest I am and let her son die?"
Okay, and then he reaches out to God, as you would, who was it who said that? Who Betsy would have done that, the same thing. And then what does he say? ויתמודד על הילד 3 פעמים, ויקרא אל אדוני, ויאמר אדוני אלוהי, תשבנה נפש הילד הזה על קרבו. And then what did he do?
Then he stretched out over the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, saying, "O Lord, my God, let this child's life return to his body."
Okay, so we're getting a pretty involved story here. וישמע אדוני בקול אליהו, ותשב נפש הילד על קרבו, ויחי. And what happened?
The Lord heard Elijah's plea. The child's life returned to his body and he revived.
Right. Wow. So then Elijah ויקח אליהו את הילד ויורידהו מן העלייה הביתה ויתנהו לאמו ויאמר אליהו ראי חי בנך.
Elijah picked up the child and brought him down from the upper room into the main room and gave him to his mother. "See," said Elijah, "your son is alive."
Right. So of course everybody tries to explain this. When he lied down 3 times, he was giving him CPR. That's one way that they try to get around, those who are always looking for it. But whatever it is, Elijah's connection to God is solid enough that when he asked this very, very difficult thing, now the child is not necessarily hasn't died necessarily. His breath is heavy, but whatever it is, Elijah appeals to God, and certainly he is helped. ותאמר איש אליהו, אתה זה ידעתי כי איש אלוהים אתה ודבר דברי בפיך אמת. And then the woman answered, what she say?
And the woman answered Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God and that the word of the Lord is truly in your mouth."
So it's kind of interesting. Getting enough food to last her for a long time wasn't enough. She still had some doubts about this fellow. But
Well,
guess what? That she is finally convinced that he is the man of God, and the word of God is truly in his mouth.
Do you think
Okay.
that's a conversion?
A conversion?
Yeah, because before she said your God when she first met him.
She
She
said
didn't
God.
say our God.
I see. It's
Good
unclear.
point.
It's unclear. I would say that it's not that she converted. I think that she her skepticism was turned into into a sense of more faith. Right.
Well,
You got to understand,
Ramon,
people weren't walking around from all the time, Leah. You know what I mean?
yeah.
There
Yeah,
were
but
many
she said
people.
your God. It was.
Yeah. Well.
I think it means more than that. I think.
Well, it could be someone who was on the. It doesn't say it's a non-Jewish town. It's a etc. It doesn't know. We don't know. But the bottom line is, you're right. There's a new acknowledgement at the end of the story that was not there before.
But
Right?
isn't
There's a
this
new
a little
acknowledgement.
bit like the Jesus story when he
Oh, yeah, I mean, right. All of the New Testament stories are based on older stories. Yes.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem to me that she didn't think that he was a prophet to begin with. It's just that as soon as he is not giving her what she wants, she removes her belief.
Yeah.
And then so it's not as though she did believe him at first because he did what she needed. And then suddenly he doesn't do what she needed.
Yeah.
And she goes back once he does.
As I said
that's
before,
the way humans are.
That's right. I think human nature, I said earlier, I can give you manna all day. You'll say, enough manna, give me something else.
Right.
That seems
Give
to
me
be
cake.
human nature. Okay.
Well, there's another issue. Like you said, there
Excuse me.
were.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
The other issue is that you said there were kind of wandering groups of prophets. So how are people supposed to know which is the true prophet or the true God?
That's a very big question. The Torah talks already about it a little bit. In the future, there'll be prophets because the Torah was written when these prophets already existed, and there were a number of characteristics that made you a true prophet, and some that weren't. One, that your prophecy has some power and it activates some energy in the world, and that you do not ask people to veer away from the faithfulness to the one God. If a prophet comes and tells you, we have to veer away, that's not a true prophet. Okay, so now that was one tale, and I'm bringing it up because it becomes a paradigmatic tale for the later Elijah that we'll meet in other contexts. So now we have another story much later in the third year. The third year of who? Of Ahab's reign. ויהי ימים רבים בדבר אדוני, היה אל אליהו בשנה השלישית לאמור, לך הראה אל אחיו ואתנה מטר על פני אדמה. And then what does he say? Verse 1.
Much later in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go appear before Ahab, then I will send rain upon the earth.
Okay, so there's been a drought for about 3 years, if you can imagine. But you know what? We know places in the world where that is the case. Many, many years of drought. So vayelech Eliyahu laharot el achav v'harav chazak v'shomron. Thereupon,
Elijah set out to appear before Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria.
vayikra achav el Ovadyahu asher al habayit ve'Ovadyahu haya yarei et Adonai me'od.
Ahab had summoned Obadiah, the steward of the palace. Obadiah revered the Lord greatly.
Right. So here is somebody who was in the palace, but who was not a pagan. Vayihi kechachrit Isabel et nevi'ei Adonai vayikach Ovadyahu mea nevi'im v'yachbi'em 50 ish b'mara v'kilkelam lechem v'mayim.
When Jezebel was killing off the people.
Excuse me, one at a time. Yes, when Jezebel
was killing off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and provided them with food and drink.
Wow.
Okay, so this Jezebel, we're getting a little bit of a hint about her nature. Okay, she is very, very, how should I say, has problems with prophets. Okay, Vayomer Achav El Eliyahu lech baaretz v'kol ma'anei hamayim v'kol hanachalim ulai nimtzah chatzir v'nechayes sus uferet v'alo nachrit b'hamehema. And then what did Ahab say to him?
And Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the wadis. Perhaps we shall find some grass to keep horses and mules alive, so that we are not left without beasts.
יחלקו להם את הארץ, לעבור בה. אחאב הלך בדרך אחד לבדו, ועובדיה הלך בדרך אחד לבדו.
Doesn't it seem strange the king would go alone?
Well, it's quite clear that he felt he had to do it himself. He didn't trust very many people. So what does he do? He goes alone in one direction, and Obadiah goes alone in another direction. ויהי עובדיה בדרך, והנה אליהו לקראתו, ויכירהו, ויפול לפניו, ויאמר, האתה זה אדוני אליהו? And what does he say, Obadiah?
Obadiah was on the road when Elijah suddenly confronted him. Obadiah recognized him and flung himself on his face, saying, is that you, my lord, Elijah?
ויאמר לו, אני, לך אמור לאדונך, הנה אליהו.
Yes, it is, he answered. Go tell your lord, Elijah is here.
Okay, Elijah is here. It's very adventurous. ויאמר, מה חטאתי כי אתה נותן לעבדך ביד אחיו להמיתנו? And he said, this is Obadiah, I guess, retorting to Elijah.
But he said, what's wrong? What wrong have I done that you should hand your servant over to Ahab to be killed?
Right. He's a little bit wary of this bringing Elijah to Ahab, rightly so. Chai Adonai Elohecha, im yesh goy u'mamlacha asher lo shalach Adoni sham levakeshcha, ve'amru ayin ve'hishbiya et ha'mamlacha v'et hagoy ki lo yimtza'eka.
As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom to which my Lord has not sent to look for you. And when they said, he is not here, he made that kingdom or nation swear that you could not be found.
So Eliyahu has a reputation, it seems, because what did he do at the beginning of the last chapter? What does he do? He causes a drought. Okay, so he's looking for this guy, and he can't find him, and he's not to be found because he's being protected. Wherever he goes, he's not to be found. He said, I can't find him. So he goes down again, and we read on. We're on verse 13 now. Verse 12, what's that? Verse 12, I believe. Yes, right? When I leave you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you off. I don't know where. And when I come and tell Ahab he does not find you, he will kill me. Yet your servant has revered the Lord from my youth. What am I going to do? Obadiah says, if I show up and I don't know where you are. When I come and tell him that he doesn't find you, he will kill me. And I've been a good guy all these years. Why would he kill me? So, my Lord, hello, who God, verse 13, who God, la Adoni, et asher asiti v'charog, Isabel et nevi'ei Adonai, ve'achvi, v'nevi'ei Adonai, me'et, ish 50 ish b'mara, ve'akalkem lechem u'mayim. And then he tells Elijah what he did.
My Lord has surely been told what I did when Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 of the prophets of the Lord, 50 men to a cave, and provided them with food and drink.
ואתה אומר, לך אמור לאדונך, הנה אליהו והרגני.
And now go tell your Lord Elijah.
And now you say, okay, what is he saying?
Go tell your Lord Elijah is here. Why? He will kill me.
Right. ויאמר אליהו, חי אדוני צבאות, אשר עמדתי לפניו, כי היום אראה אליו. And Elijah replied,
as the Lord of hosts lives, whom I serve, I will appear before him this very day.
ילך עובדיה הוא לקראת אחיו, ויגד לו, וילך אחיו לקראת אליהו.
Obadiah
Moshe-
went to find Ahab and informed him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah.
ויהי כראות אחאב את אליהו, ויאמר אחאב אליו, ואתה זה עוקר ישראל?
When Ahab caught sight of Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?"
Right, and Oker Yisrael is always used as a curse later on. And Oker Yisrael. ויאמר לו, עקרתי את ישראל, כי אם אתה ובית אביך בעזבכם את מצוות אדוני ותלך אחרי הבעלים. And what did he say? He retorted.
He retorted, "It is not I who have brought trouble on Israel, but you and your father's house by forsaking the commandments of the Lord and going after the Baalim."
אתה שלח כבוץ אליי ואת כל ישראל אל הר הכרמל ואת נביאי הבעל, 450 נביאי האשרה, 400 אוכלי שולחן איזבל. It's a very famous story we're going to read now. Go on. Now
summon all Israel to join me in Mount Carmel, together with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Hasherah, who eats at Jezebel's table.
Right, that's a great name for a restaurant, Jezebel's table. I don't think so. וישלח אחאב וכל בני ישראל ויקבוץ את נביאי אל הר הכרמל. And he does what?
Ahab sent orders to all the Israelites and gathered the prophets at Mount Carmel.
Right. ויגש אליהו את כל העם ויאמר עד מתי אתם פוסחים על שני הסעיפים? ואם אדוני אלוהים לכו אחריו ואם הבעל לכו אחריו ולא ענו העם אותו דבר. So what did he say?
Elijah approached all the people and said, "How long will you keep hopping between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, and if Baal, follow him." But the people answered him not a word.
Right. In modern Hebrew, you also use the term poschim al shtei sifim, trying to be on two sides of a question at the same time. You know, I guess the term is used. It's called waffling, right? That's what it means. So you got to understand, people are doing both. They're ostensibly serving the traditional God, but they also are serving Baal. So he's saying, make up your mind. Ani notarti navi l'Adonai levadi nevi'ei habal 450 ish. And then what did Elijah say to the people?
Then Elijah said to the people, I am the only prophet of the Lord left, while the prophets of Baal are 450 men.
ויתנו לנו שניים פרים ויבחרו להם הפר אחד וינתחוהו וישימו על העצים ואש לא ישימו ואני אעשה את הפר האחד ונתתי על העצים ואש לא אשים. So what's going to happen now?
Well, I thought that Obadiah had actually saved some of the prophets of God and
but he's doing something now to show that he has great power himself.
Yeah, so he's doing an animal sacrifice.
They need 450. I'm going to be there on my own. So this is a bit of
showmanship.
Showmanship, exactly, and you'll see why in a moment. Go on.
But Moshe, but the other 100 prophets that were put in the caves,
right?
So they're also prophets. I mean, prophesying on behalf of the Lord, or are they also prophesying on behalf of God?
From what we see is that they were prophets who were not telling the king and queen what they wanted to hear, so they were being executed. Ahab and Jezebel have a tendency, as many of these kings have, of using the off with your head methodology of dealing with issues. These were not people who, as we saw in one of our films, it's good to be the king. I mean, they could do whatever they wanted. And it's quite clear that Ahab and Jezebel are presented to us as being totally evil, base people who will get rid of anybody who stands in their way. So
sounds familiar.
Yeah. Let two young bulls be given to us. Would like to read that? 23.
Let 2 young bulls be given to us. Let them choose one bull, cut it up, and lay it on the wood, but let them not apply fire. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood, and will not apply fire.
Okay, וקראתם בשם אלוהיכם, ואני אקרא בשם אדוני, והיה אלוהים אשר יענה באש, הוא האלוהים, ויען כל העם, ויאמרו טוב הדבר. He said, okay, I have a contest going here. What do they say?
You will then invoke your God by name, and I will invoke the Lord by name. And let us agree, the God who responds with fire, that one is God. And all the people answered, very good.
Okay, so we got a contest going here. ויאמר אליהו לנביא הבעל, בחרו לכם הפר אחד ועשו ראשונה, כי אתם הרבים, וקראו בשם אלוהיכם, ואיש לא תשימו.
Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one bull and prepare it first, for you are the majority. Invoke your God by name, but apply no fire.
ויקחו את הפר, we're on the next verse 26, ויקחו את הפר אשר נתן להם ויעשו ויקראו בשם הבעל, מהבוקר ועד הצהריים לאמור הבעל, עננו ואין קול ואין עונה, ויפסחו על המזבח אשר עשה. So what happened? They took the bull. Yeah, go ahead.
They took the bull that was given them. They prepared it and invoked Baal by name from morning until noon, shouting, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no sound, and none who responded. So they performed a hopping dance about the altar that had been set up.
Okay, that's an old, venerable hopping dance that many cults have, many cultures have. ויהי בצהריים ויהתל בהם אליהו ויאמר קראו בקול גדול אלוהים, כי אלוהים הוא כי שיח כי השיג לו כי הדרך לו אולי ישן הוא ויקץ. When noon came,
Elijah mocked them, saying, "Shout louder. After all, he is a God. But he may be in conversation. He may be detained, or he may be on a journey, and perhaps he is asleep and won't wake up." So just, Moshe,
he's mocking them, obviously. Go ahead.
A question. So since I'm reading the prophets and it's about, God feels man, God is not like the Greek gods, just, indifferent to what humanity is doing. So this is a tale that is consistent with that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he's certainly consistent, but he's really laying it on thick, right? He says, well, maybe God's on vacation, maybe he took he's away for the weekend, maybe he's asleep. So shout louder, maybe you got to shout louder. ויקראו בקול גדול ויתגודדו כמשפטם בחרבות וברווחים עד שפך דם עליהם.
So they shouted louder and gashed themselves with knives and spears according to their practice until the blood streamed over them.
Right. ויהי כעבור הצהריים ויתנבאו עד לעלות המנחה ואין קול ואין עונה ואין קשב.
When noon passed, they kept raving until the hour of presenting the meal offering. Still there was no sound, and none who responded or heeded.
ויאמר אליהו לכל העם, גשו אליי ויקשו כל העם אליו, וירפא את המזבח אדוני ההרוס.
Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come closer to me." And all the people came closer to him. He repaired the damaged altar of the Lord.
ויקח אליהו 12 אבנים כמספר שבטי בני יעקב, אשר היה דבר אדוני אליו לאמור, ישראל יהיה שמך. Verse 31.
And Elijah took 12 stones corresponding to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come. Israel shall be your name.
ויבנה את האבנים במזבח בשם אדוני, ויעש תעלה כבית סעתיים זרע סביב למזבח. 32.
And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. Around the altar he made a trench large enough for 2 seahs of seed.
Seah is let's say two sacks of seed, right? He builds like a trench. ויערוך העצים וינתח את הפר וישם על העצים.
He laid out the wood, and he cut up the bull and laid it on the wood.
ויאמר מילאו 4 קדים מים ויצקו על העולה ועל העצים ויאמר שנו וישנו ויאמר שלשו וישלשו.
And he said, fill 4 jars with water and pour it over the burnt offering and the wood. Then he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. Do it a third time, he said, and they did it a third time.
וילכו המים סביב למזבח וגם התעלה מלא מים.
The water ran down the altar, and even the trench was filled with water.
Okay, so he's really laying it on, okay? ויהי בעלות המנחה ויגש אליהו הנביא ויאמר אדוני אלוהי אברהם יצחק וישראל היום יוודע כי אתה אלוהים בישראל ואני עבדך ובדברך עשיתי את כל הדברים האלה.
When it was time to present the meal offering, the prophet Elijah came forward and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding.
הנני אדוני, הנני בידוע העם הזה, כי אתה אדוני אלוהים ואתה הסיבות את ליבם אחרונית.
Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, for you have turned their hearts backward.
ותיפול אש אדוני ותאכל את העולה ואת העצים ואת האבנים ואת העפר ואת המים אשר בתעלה לחיקה.
Then the fire from the Lord descended and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the earth, and it licked up all the water that was in the trench.
וירא כל העם ויפלו על פניהם ויאמרו אדוני הוא אלוהים, אדוני הוא אלוהים.
They saw this, all the people flung themselves on their faces and cried out, the Lord alone is God, the Lord alone is God.
ויאמר אליהו להם תפסו את נביאי הבעל, איש אל ימלט מהם, ויתפסום ויורידום אליהו אל נחל קישון, וישחטם שם.
Then Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, let not a single one of them get away. So they seized them, and Elijah took them down to the Wadi Kishon and slaughtered them there.
Right. Elijah has a bit of a temper. And throughout the book of Kings, there's a tremendous amount of violence. But he actually slaughters them according to this story. So what happens then? Vayomer Eliyahu lachav alei achol ushnei ki kol hamon hageshem.
Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there is a rumbling of approaching rain.
Right. So all of this is done to break this drought. ויעלה אחיו לאכול ולשתות ואליהו עלה ראש הכרמל ויגהר ארצה וישם פניו בין ברכיו.
And Ahab went up to eat and drink. Elijah, meanwhile, climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, crouched on the ground, and put his face between his knees.
Right. So you got to understand, there is this sense of exhaustion, of him having brought all of this through him, etc. Vayomer el naro alena bet derech yam vial viabet vayomer ein mu'uma vayomer shuv sheva pamim.
And he said to his servant, go up and look toward the sea. He went up and looked and reported, there is nothing. 7 times Elijah said, go back.
ויהי בשביעית ויאמר הנה אב קטנה ככף האיש עולה מים ויאמר עלי אמור אליכיו אסור ורד ולא יעצרך הגשם.
And the 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising in the west. Then Elijah said, go say to Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you.
ויהי עד כה והשמיים התקרדו אבים ורוח, ויהי גשם גדול, וירכב אחאב וילך יזרעאלה. Meanwhile,
The hand of the Lord had come upon Elijah.
one
No.
before 45.
Meanwhile, the sky.
Meanwhile, the sky grew
Right.
black and clouds. There was wind, and the heavy downpour fell. Ahab mounted his chariot and drove off to Jezreel.
This is Emek Yisrael. It's up, not Yisrael, but Yisrael. It's up in the Galil. V'yad Adonai hayta Eliyahu vayishanes matnav vayaratz lifnei Achav ad boacha Yisraela.
The hand of the Lord had come upon Elijah. He tied up his skirts and ran in front of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
Okay, so we finished another story. So we have another tale. It's kind of interesting how these tales, and we're going to have now another one, but these tales are self-contained. They're self-contained stories, which leads us to believe that these stories circulated quite widely, and that they were stylized to a certain degree, and they were able to remain in the story form. You notice it's a dialogue. It's very, very well stylized. It's not just one person running on and on. It has people speaking to each other back and forth, and there's certain drama that's built up. And Elijah proves to be a very, very, if you will, ballsy guy. Okay, he's a really gutsy fellow. Vayaged Achav leIzabel, and Achav says to Isabel, "Kol asher asa Eliyahu v'kol asher harag et kol haneviim acharev."
When Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had put all the prophets to the sword,
ותשלח Isabel malach el Eliyahu לאמור, כה יעשו אלוהים וכה יוסיפו, כי כעת מחר אשים את נפשך כנפש אחת מהם.
Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, "Thus and more may the gods do, if by this time tomorrow I have not made you like one of them."
Right. She's not afraid. She says, "Vayar, vayakam, el vayelech el nafsho v'yavo be'er shava asher Yehuda v'yarach et naro sham."
Frightened, he fled at once for his life. He came to Beersheba, which is in Judah, and left his servant there.
והוא הלך במדבר דרך יום ויבוא וישב תחת רותם אחד וישאל את נפשו למות ויאמר רב אתה אדוני קח נפשי כי לא טוב. I can't read the next two words. Connections available. אנוכי מאבותיו. And he himself
went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush and sat down under it and prayed that he might die. "Enough," he cried. "Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers."
וישכב וישן תחת רותם אחד והנה איזה מלאך נוגע בו ויאמר לו קום אכול. Rotem, by the way, Rotem is, I have a grand nephew called Rotem. A lot of Israeli names are nature names.
Right. Yeah. He lay down and fell asleep under a broom bush. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat."
And vayabet v'hinei merashotav ugat tzafim v'tzipachat mayim v'yochal v'yesh v'yashav v'yishkav. And guess what?
He looked about, and there beside his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again.
וישב מלאך אדוני שנית ויגע ויאמר קום אכול כי רב ממך הדרך.
The angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, or the journey will be too much for you."
Okay, this starts a very interesting story, and you'll notice a lot of things that are foreshadowed at a certain degree earlier. Vayakam, vayochal, vayishteh, vayelech, v'koach, hachila, hahi, 40 yom, ve'arba'im laila, ad har ha'elohim chorev. Okay,
He
we
rose.
get this story, which this is, by the way, found in the New Testament as well. Okay,
He arose and ate and drank, and with the strength from that meal, he walked 40 days and 40 nights. Heard that somewhere else.
Yes,
as
of
far
course.
as the mountain of God at Horeb.
Right. So what is Mount Horeb? What is Horeb?
Sinai, isn't it?
Sinai, right. Horeb
Yeah.
is found in the desert of Sinai. So what's happening here? Elijah is now coming into a sort of a Moses mode. It's fascinating. He's going to have a desire to go to Mount Horeb for an experience, something that already people knew happened at Mount Horeb, which was the giving of the Torah. So he went into the cave. It says, I love this line. Then he went into a cave, please.
There he went into a cave, and there he spent the night. Then the word of the Lord came to him. He said to him, "Why are you here, Elijah?"
It's so funny because he was sent in a way here, but he's asking, "Why are you here?" Now, is that the same kind of question, which is a rhetorical question?
Right.
Not why are you here, because where you should be somewhere else. But what are you looking for here? Why are you here? It's like when God asked the question, right, in the Garden of Eden, Ayeka, where are you? It isn't that God doesn't know where they are. He's saying, but where are you? It's how you pronounce the words, right? It's the rhythm of the words.
We also ask on either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur.
Who asked that?
Why are we here?
Yeah, why are we here? Why are we here? So Vayomer, Kano kineti l'Adonai Elohei tzvaot ki azvu b'nitcha b'nei Yisrael et mizbechotecha harasu v'teviecha harku b'charev ve'ivater ani levadi v'yivakshu et nafshi lekachma. And he says, I am what? He replied,
I am moved by
zeal
for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life.
Okay. V'yomer tzei v'amadata bahar lefnei Adonai v'hinei Adonai over v'ruach gedola v'chazak mefarech harim u'mishaber tzlaim lefnei Adonai lo beruach Adonai v'achar haruach rash lo v'rash Adonai.
But
What did he
is
say
that-
to do?
is that
Come out of your
Elijah?
cave, right? Come out of your cave.
But listen, who's saying that? Elijah is saying that he's the only one left?
That's what he sees himself. Right?
Well,
He's in
prophet-
a deep. He's very depressed. He says, "I have failed. Ultimately, I'm a failure. The
For
people are
what?
breaking your covenant. I feel desperate and alone.
Yeah.
I've come here for some reason to find out." He's doing a 40-day retreat, however you want to see it, right? But you have this idea of the 40 days and 40 nights all the way through the Torah. It's a motif, right? Moses is on the mountain 40 days, etc. Doesn't eat or drink. Later on, Jesus in the New Testament goes out into the desert for 40 days. It's all based on the same kind of archetype. So what happens? Come out, stand on the mountain before God, and lo, God passed by. And there was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains, shattering rocks by the power of the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And this is a very famous line right here.
Yeah.
Bachar harash esh lo ba'esh Adonai, bachar ha'esh kol daka. And we say that as part of the poem of Unetana Tokef. B'shofar gadol yitaka, right? V'kol demama yishama. After the earthquake, please. Verse
After
12.
the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft murmuring sound.
Vayehi b'shmo Eliyahu.
Isn't that it?
Vayelet panav ba'adarto v'yetzei v'yamod petach ha'ma'ara v'hinei alav kol vayomer ma lecha po Eliyahu.
Oh my God.
So
And
when Elijah, go ahead.
He wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then a voice addressed him, "Why are you here, Elijah?"
Again, asking, have you found out why? Why are you here? Vayomer, kano kineto letzvot ki azvu b'nitcha. Aren't we used to do the same thing?
Huh?
Let's go down. I think we read this already. Let's go down a little bit more. Okay. Vayomer, verse 15. Vayomer Adonai elav, lech shuv ledarkecha midbara dameshech uvata umashachta et Chazael lemelech al Aram. And what does the Lord say to him to do?
The Lord
said to him,
Oh.
go ahead.
The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and on and to the wilderness of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael as king.
Chazael, right?
Hazael
Right. Lemelech
As king of Aram.
of Aram. Interesting. Chazael, by the way, is somebody who sees God.
Yeah.
Chazot. So he's being told to get involved a little bit in the geopolitical, if you will, a scene that's going on. Aram is on the other side of the Jordan. I want you to make him king. I want you to get a power force that can fight against Achav. So he does that. Ve'et Yehu ben Nimshi timshach lemelech al Yisrael el Elisha ben Shaphat ma'abel mechola timshach lenavi tachtecha. And he says what?
Also anoint Yehu, son of Nimshi, as king of Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat of Ego Meholah, to succeed you as prophet.
V'haya hanimlat b'cherev Chazael yamit, v'Yehu hanimlat b'cherev Yehu yamit Elisha.
Whoever escapes the sword of Hazael shall be slain by Yehu, and whoever escapes the sword of Yehu shall be slain by Elisha.
Elisha is very important, very important student of
yeah.
his. V'yisharti b'Yisrael shiva alafim al abrakayim asher lo karu lebal v'chol ha'peh asher lo nashach lo.
But Reb Moshe, you were just saying before how Ahab and Jezebel had this modus operandi where they would just like off with their heads.
Right.
Isn't this the same damn thing?
Right, but it's you're right. I think you're right in a sense that there is this motif in this world at this time. Unfortunately, still exists in many places in the world to this day, where there is this understanding that power is it has to be wielded in order to get what you want. Power has to be wielded, right? So I'm not saying they're terrible, Achav and Yezebel, because they kill people. No, a lot of people kill people, but they were killing the wrong people. Get it? They were killing not the ones who are our side. They were killing those that are against us. So what happens? He comes across Elijah, Elisha, and Vayelech Misham Yimtza Elisha ben Shaphat v'Choresh Le'Masah Simadim Lefanav v'Hu B'Shnei Masar v'Yavor Elayu Alav v'Yashlech Adarto Elav. And it basically talks about the fact that Elisha becomes the main student, the main follower of Elijah. And I'll just go a little further. He left the oxen and ran after Elijah, saying, "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and I will follow you." And he answered him, "Go back. What have I done to you?" And he turned back from him, and took the yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He boiled their meat with the gear of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. And then he arose and followed Elijah to become his attendant. So we've read a number of chapters. We're going to stop here for now and do a little bit of talking. So what we have here is a fairly encapsulated stories about Elijah. However, this interlude with Elisha is sort of a little bit before the end of our stories of Elijah, which will come up again in chapter 21 of the first book of in chapter 21 of the first book of Kings, and later we're going to meet Elijah again in the first two chapters of the second book of Kings, which we will get to in a little while. But I don't want to go a little too far with the text. But basically, what we have here is a individual character who is zealous. Okay, let's really see him as a zealot. Okay, and a zealot can often be very extreme, and he has zeal. He has zeal for God. He is very, very, very much willing to do anything, it seems, anything. And he has support for it, because ultimately in the great contest between him and the prophets of Baal, God shows favor upon him and he is successful. He also has a deep, if you will, problematic personality. He's lacking in self-confidence. Why should he after all of this? He feels alone. He feels desperate. He wants to have a new revelation of God. So where does he go? He goes to where Moses went, where the children of Israel first heard God speak the 10 sayings. And he goes up at Horeb and he learns something. He learns something that God is not in the whirlwind, but God is in the small voice, the eternal voice, internal voice, the internal voice. And it's a lesson that he learns. And I think you'll see in the following stories that we'll come to, is that this really changes him. This is a change moment. And he, at this point, he feels that maybe he's fulfilled his work in the world, and he's told, find someone that will take over and bring your zeal to the next stage. But we will still encounter Elijah in a little while. So let's just start with that first story, which becomes a paradigmatic story about him and the widow of in the town that he goes to, and then you get the story of his being a showman, a public figure who is always doing things very dramatically. He's a drama person, going to the mountain. It's a journey of self-discovery, of self. Right. Every time it says to go into the desert, it talks about somehow letting the wilderness be a place to hear, right? Like we say, Bamidbar, right? Midaber. In the Midbar, we can hear what is being spoken. So he's a very complex character, and we'll read more about him in the weeks to come. And then we'll go into another shift where we're going to go and see how he becomes very much part of the Talmud in a different form, and also he will become very much part of the Kabbalah, mysticism, and then of course he will also become an inhabitant of myriads of stories in both the Sephardic tradition and the Ashkenazic tradition, and he will become very much a household name and someone who is deeply connected with us individually as we go through the different parts of our own lives. So that's our goal, and I want to do it with sort of text-oriented rather than just speaking to you. So we'll read a little bit more next time, and we'll get to another place where it talks about Elijah's leaving the earth without dying. Without dying.
Oh.
That will add a great deal to Elijah's cachet, if you know what I mean. He will be taken up with a fiery chariot into heaven. And from that time on, Elijah will serve as a sort of a semi-angelic kind of figure who has never died. There's only one other person in the Torah that they say this about, and that is who? Anybody remember from the book of Genesis? Hanoch, Enoch. Hanoch says, and God walked with him. So there's two characters, and both Enoch and Elijah will play a very important role in the intertestamental period, in the Talmudic period, and Eliyahu HaNavi really becomes an important figure. And then finally, we know him from the Haftarah, which is the Haftarah said before Passover, which are the last words of the prophets. And that would be that I have sent before you Elijah on this great day, right? Yom Gadol, Shabbat Hagadol. And he will do what? He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. And by doing so, he will prevent utter destruction. So Elijah's role is embedded already in the period of the prophets. He has somehow created a framework around him, a mythic framework around him, where he is seen and will continue to be seen as the harbinger of the Messiah. The harbinger of the Messiah. So all of those things will be layers upon layers upon layers that become Elijah's role, and it's a fascinating thing. I often, I'll end with this. We have it's 8:30, so you'll indulge me for a minute. In Buddhism, there is this idea that the Buddha reached enlightenment, or they call nirvana, nibbana. And he could have stayed in nirvana. He could have stayed in that place of the erasure of all ego and connection to all things, but he decides not to. He decides to come back and help others on the road towards enlightenment. And he's called a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva. You may have heard the term. It's a great Scrabble word if you have a lot of tiles. So, excuse me. So the bodhisattva becomes an example of what is called in Buddhism, Buddha nature. Buddha nature. And all of us have Buddha nature. All of us have the capacity to become awakened. The word Buddhism, Buddha means the awakened one, someone who's awakened. Not awakened from sleep, but awakened to a new reality that is achieved by observing the world.
Rabbi?
And I've been thinking about for years about the fact that we have I think an Elijah nature, where Elijah never stays dead, never dies, and that ever living, if you will, Elijah nature is within all of us as well, because all of us are harbingers of the Messiah by what we do, by what we accomplish, by what we try to do to make the world a messianic world, a world where we can say no to death and yes to life. Any questions, comments? I just don't want to take
Rabbi?
more of your time. Yes, please.
So-
Reb Moshe, the rabbi couldn't come.
Reb Moshe, right?
Right,
So it reminded me of what Kamala Harris said the other night when she said her mother told her, when you move in this world, bring up the others along behind you and let them see that they can be like you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what a person of prominence and power who has achieved a great deal, the greatest thing that person could do is to bring people along with them.
Right.
And that's really true of anybody, as you know, in your own life, that, what gives any fulfillment, I think, for me, is the people who have come along with me on this journey. And that's always the most satisfying thing, because you can't finish it all. You have to have people come along. You can't finish it all, right? So they have to be on the journey with you and lift them up and give them a sense of power, empower them. And that's what I think she was talking about, that
Right.
she felt empowered by her mom.
Right.
And if you read her biography very carefully, wow, she got a lot from her mom, a real lot. And she's going to share that, and she has shared it. And I'm looking forward to it very, very much. And I'm sorry we have these 70 days for him to burn everything down before he goes. It's much too much time to give a lame duck president. He can destroy so much, but we will rebuild it.
Does anyone remember, Elijah, if you didn't, when you were a little person, when you were
Right.
younger, if you fell asleep during the Seder, Elijah would take you away.
This I did not hear. No.
I seem to recall
Right.
this.
We'll get to Elijah at the Seder. A lot of people, it's a much later development. It's a much later development, Elijah at the Seder. And then there is a couple of reasons for it. There are a couple of reasons for it. We'll get to all that stuff. So thank you. I know we did a lot of text tonight, but you know what? It's always good to read the actual text, because people have never, I think, actually looked at this.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's fabulous.
And just to see it, that this is the foundational stories that will eventually, and we'll do a little bit more text the next time, but I promise you by week 4, we'll have everything we ever needed to know about Elijah. And if not, I'll send you to a couple of books.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Thank you so much. It's really,
wonderful.
it's so much fun to be back with you all. It really is.
Keep doing
Yeah.
it.
Be
Keep
well.
doing it.
Thank you, Rav Tiferet, for your